All right, hello and welcome in everyone to the very first official episode of the Fantasy.bums podcast. My name is Shanholtz, and alongside me we have Nick, Lucas, and Tyler. And we're just simple dudes talking fantasy sports, So hopefully you enjoy the content and like what we have to say. To start off the series for episode one, we're just going to do something sweet and simple. We're just going to do very early sleeper picks for everyone. I know the draft's coming up, and we're just kind of in like limbo for football. So we're going to do sleeper picks. How we have this set up is we're going to do QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and we include kickers and defense in our league. So we're also going to give you guys kickers and defense as well. So each of us have our own list. So each position has four sleepers that we're going to pick. So hopefully one lands for you if you like one of our picks more than the other. So I'm going to go first, and then Nick, Lucas, and Tyler. So we're each going to give you four sleepers for each position. And we pick our sleepers kind of different. So I'm going to kind of give you my criteria for my sleepers. So for my sleepers, I base mine off late ADP placement. So I'm looking for players lower on the draft board, maybe lower mid to late rounds, even undrafted. And then I like my players tall and I like them big. So I'm looking for over 6 foot and 200 pounds. I'm kind of like the hot girl at the bar. I have my pick of any guy. So if they're 6 foot or under, short kings are not included in my list. And then I also like more favorable fantasy positions compared to last year. That could be a switch of teams, a release of players, or the bringing in of another player to boost their fantasy thing. So starting off for mine, QB, we have Kenny Pickett of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last year, he finished QB 28 in standard and PPR. He's 6'3", 220 pounds, so fits the criteria for my list. A couple facts about him is he's the record setter in NCAA. If you're wondering what record he set, it's for the most fake slides with one. And he's definitely not going to have that record broken because they made a rule after him for no more fake slides. So the all-time leader in NCAA fake slides. So if you like record setters, you're going to like Kenny Pickett. Another stat I have for you is tied for QB1 in the 2022 NFL season for the most gloves worn with 2, tied with Teddy Bridgewater. If you like comparing players with other players, let me give you a list of some notable QBs that wore 2 gloves. And let's see if you guys know him. Doug Flutie wore 2 gloves. That's a pretty familiar name, yeah. Kurt Warner, also a pretty familiar name.
Best undrafted quarterback of all time.
Yeah, you can't argue that. And Peyton Manning for the Denver Broncos. So I mean,
I forgot about Manning wearing 2 gloves.
Yeah, he had nerve something in his hand, so he had to wear 2 gloves.
I forgot about
3
that.
Hall of Famers. If you like comparing players to players, Kenny Pickett's a future Hall of Famer. So going into his sophomore year, he played 13 games last year, so he's missed 4 games for the total 17. So he could have added more to these stats. He completed 245 passes for 2,404 yards and 7 touchdowns. I definitely see his touchdowns and yards increasing from last year, his rookie season. Mike Tomlin kind of eased him into the offense. And one thing I like about Kenny Pickett is his rushing upside potential. He had 55 rushing attempts for 237 yards and 3 touchdowns. All 3 of those stats finished within QB 15. So the upside's there. He finished 28, but all those were in the top 15. So if he increases his volume in the rushing game, I could see his numbers increasing as well, total for fantasy. And then another thing I have is Deontay Johnson had 0 touchdowns, which I believe this is the only parallel universe where that happened. There's no way that ever happens again, especially since he had 147 targets, which put him wide receiver 8 in targets. And then he also had 86 catches, and that puts him at wide receiver 15. He finishes wide receiver 30 in PPR, and with those stats, I see that increasing as well. So if you're looking for a free sleeper in the wide receiver spot, Deontay Johnson could be your guy. George Pickett's also good. He had 15.4 yards per catch, which is very high for a wide receiver. And they just added Allen Robinson a few hours before this podcast signed. So he has the weapons around him. Pat Freiermuth and Najee are also 2 very good offensive pieces that he could have around him. So I see Kenny Pickett being a lot better in his sophomore season. So going to Nick, who is your QB sleeper?
First of all, I'd like to say I like to pick my sleepers based off of change of scenery, different teams, that kind of stuff. And then if a starter steps down, gets traded, retires, cut, leave, whatever. So with that being said, I'm going with a quarterback who basically moved from West Coast to East Coast, and we're going to go Derek Carr. Derek Carr's a pretty middle of the pack quarterback. He isn't anybody that's going to, jump out to you on the stat sheet. He has a good resume of being relatively consistent with good wide receivers. And he's got some good wide receivers in New Orleans. He's got arguably one of the best rookies in I guess second year now, Chris Olave, who put up insane deep ball numbers. And we all know Derek Carr loves to throw the ball deep, as he completed 305 passes for 3,500 yards and 24 touchdowns. I do see the touchdowns going up because Chris Olave is such a threat down the field. And I mean, a healthy Michael Thomas just helps progressing the ball down the field too. Michael Thomas could have he could be a target monster, kind of like Devontae Adams was. But at the end of the day, all we're focusing on is Derek Carr today. He finished quarterback 17 standard and PPR, again, just below that middle of the pack, just below the dividing line. He doesn't run the ball. It is interesting that I have 24 rushing attempts for 102 yards. So that's not going to get you very much. But he stays healthy, majority. He played 15 games last year. And if he can play a full season with Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, if Kamara's not on suspension, Troutman, and just that whole staff of the offense, I could see him having a good, surprising year and kind of finish like a Kirk Cousins last year. Nothing too crazy, not like a quarterback 5 finish, but something around QB8, QB7, I think is Derek Carr's ceiling, and I think he could get there this year with this offense and the weapons he has.
All right, very good. So now we're going to kick it to Lucas. Lucas, who do you have for your QB sleeper?
So I have Jared Goff as my QB sleeper. You might not think of him as a sleeper. He did finish top 10 last year. I still think that his ADP is going to be way lower than 10. I think that he's going to be drafted around QB 20. You're going to be able to get him double-digit rounds, probably 13 to 15, honestly. And he's going to have Jameson Williams back full-time this year, which can be scary. He is very, very good. He will hopefully have Swift for a full season healthy. They also added David Montgomery, which could take away possible red zone passing touchdowns to Amon-Ra, which is one of the only things that really scares me about him. And then, of course, he doesn't have the rushing upside that some of the other quarterbacks have. He's not going to get you any rushing yards unless he gets you like a QB sneak touchdown. But I like the offense that Detroit has. I love Dan Campbell, so I think that he's going to be a really good option in the later rounds this year if you want a solid QB that's going to put up Kirk Cousins numbers from QB 10 to 12 every season.
Alrighty, then
before we get away from Jared Goff, I do want to say the reason Jamal Williams led the league in rushing touchdowns last year was because there were a lot of deep balls and a lot of plays where they were tackled at the one. So Jared Goff could have had 5, 6, 7 more touchdowns with 100 to 200 more yards this past season too. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that is very possible. The franchise setting Jamal Williams for the Detroit Lions. All right, so we're gonna round out our QBs with Tyler. Tyler, who do you got for us?
So first, I want to take a second and explain why I chose the sleepers that I did. I like to focus more on the situation that the player is in, the team that they're on, the kind of team that they have built. So for my sleeper, I have chose Geno Smith, the West Virginia legend.
Oh, yeah. Huge West Virginia podcast.
Oh, yeah.
West Virginia fans.
Big West Virginia boys.
Geno, if you're listening, this is for you to get on the podcast.
Yeah, hop on.
We would love to have Geno on here.
Talk some football with us.
Yeah. So I want to rattle off a couple stats here from Geno last year. So he played all 17 games, healthy quarterback. He finished 8th overall in passing yards with 4,113. His completion percentage was the best in the NFL at 68.9. He was 7th overall in average yards per attempt with 7.5. This is around guys like Josh Allen and Jared Goff, who was just mentioned with Lucas's sleeper pick. His average yard per game was 10th overall at 251 yards, which is better than Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, and Dak Prescott. He was 3rd overall in touchdowns with 30. The only people better were Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen. He did, however, throw 11 interceptions, which is tied for 5th most. But it is less than guys like Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and Joe Burrow. And he was 5th overall in passer rating, which is better than guys like Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, and Dak Prescott. And his adjusted QBR was 60.8, which is 7th overall, which is again better than guys like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, and Kirk Cousins. Now,
do you see any regression in Geno Smith this year after that amazing, I don't want to say breakout year because he's 30-something, but do you see any steps back with that?
That is a possibility with an older quarterback like Geno, a journeyman who's been on like 5-6 teams. I could see maybe a little bit of progression, but if he just keeps up similar stats, he could be a huge fantasy player. I mean, I dropped Russell Wilson for Geno Smith last year early in the season. And it worked out pretty well for me. I made it pretty deep into the playoffs. And I think that if he just mimics the season that he had, he will be a very good quarterback to take. Now, moving on to his fantasy stats, he was ranked 5th among quarterbacks with 314 points. The only people more were Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow. And he had a number of times where he was in the top 10 of fantasy finishes. He had 7 weeks where he was in the top 10. He had 8 weeks where he was in the top 15. And all but 1 week, he was in the top 20. The only time he wasn't in the top 20 was the first game against the 49ers, who arguably have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Now, his points per game, he was 8th overall with 18.5, which is better than guys like Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence, Dak, Justin Herbert. Now, moving on from just Geno himself talking about the Seahawks as a team, they were 10th overall in pass offense. So they're going to be throwing the ball. 15th in passing attempts, which is about the middle of the pack, but I could see that moving up a little bit with Geno's stats from last year. They were 7th in passing touchdowns and 13th in red zone offense. So they're going to get down the field, they're going to move the ball, and that's going to get points for your team. And just the weapons that he has. I mean, he's got DK, Lockett, Fan, Ken Walker out of the backfield. This is a good situation for a quarterback to be in, along with the head coach. I mean, I think it's a great situation for a quarterback.
And they have a lot of draft picks, too. They could always add somebody.
They do have
late
a lot
first
of
round,
picks.
Early second round, something like that.
So I am riding high on Geno.
Alrighty, so there's 4 different QBs for you to pick. We have the low ADP all the way up to QB 5 of last year.
Can I throw out an honorable mention real quick?
I guess I'll allow it.
I want to honorable mention, depending what goes down the next few weeks, I think Trey Lance is going to get traded. I think you're going to be able to get him low. Right now, it looks like the front runner to trade for him is going to be the Vikings, which he would not play this year, or another front runner I've been seeing is the Texans. If he goes to the Texans, I would jump all over that. He's going to have John Mechie, Nico Collins, Damian Pierce. So that's just something to look for the next few weeks to see where he goes.
Would you if you were offered Trey Lance right now at 10:48, would you accept the trade? Obviously, if it was a fair trade, but would you pull the trigger on Trey Lance right now, based off of the knowledge that he could get traded?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right, just to let everyone know, Lucas did finish last in our fantasy football league. So take that with a grain of salt.
I also drafted Trey Lance.
And he also drafted Trey Lance. So do with that what you will. All right, so there's 5. We even gave you an extra QB. So if you don't like one of them, I don't know what to tell you. So moving on to the running back spot, My running back will be Brian Robinson Jr. Now, out of all my sleepers, this is the most biased pick I have, simply due to the fact that for his first game back as a rookie, he ran out to many men by 50 Cent after being shot. And 50 Cent, if you don't know, was in fact shot himself. So, I mean,
multiple times.
Yes.
multiple times, yes.
More than once.
So, this is not a 10-time All-Star vet. This is a rookie thinking, you know what, let me run out to 50 Cent after I get shot. And that goes into my first fact about him. He led the league last year in most gunshot wounds with 2. Notable players that have been shot, Joey Porter, Keith Davis twice, and Terrence Keel also as a rookie. So some honorable mentions there as well for you. Just for the actual stats now, standard, he was running back 39. PPR, he was running back 43. So not as much on the PPR side. He had 205 rushing attempts for 797 yards and 2 touchdowns. As a bigger back, I like my boy's big, 6'1", 225. Just more of a power back more than anything. His 2 touchdowns were both 1-yard rushes, so it gets it done at the goal line. Not as much into the passing game, 12 for 9. So he catches the ball at a 75% rate, which is good for running backs. 60 yards and a touchdown, so he can catch a passing touchdown as well. So you don't have to worry much about that. More into he kind of played towards the end, last half of the season. So for his last 5 games, he was 18 for 105, 21 for 96, 12 for 89, 22 for 58 against San Francisco, which is first in every rushing stat except touchdowns. And then the last week of the season, he was 24 for 87. So he kind of, he had very good last 5 games of the season. So I expect him to start riding that, his last 5 games of his rookie season into his sophomore season. Another thing that I'm predicting for my sleeper is that they're going to keep Sam Howell to QB1. I really don't think they're going to pick up a QB and start or like free agency. I think they're going to try to work Sam Howell into the starting lineup. So to ease him in, I think Brian Robinson's going to get more touches early and often, just to get Sam Howell into the flow of things early in the season. That might change later on. But, if Brian Robinson goes off during the early season, they're going to keep feeding him. And then another thing I have is one man cannot tackle him. As a bigger dude, watching his games last year, it took 3 to 4 people to bring this man down. I remember one play last year, he carried like 7 people, 12 to 15 yards before they blew the whistle. So the man's an absolute unit with the ball in his hands. And I definitely see him in the right situation being a very good increase from his rookie year to his sophomore. So be on the lookout for him. All right, so kicking it to Nick now. Nick, who do you have for your running back?
Well, to get this started, I want everybody to know that I'm a disgusting Eagles homer. So, with that being said,
Go
I'm
Birds.
really sad to see Miles Sanders go. Miles Sanders is coming in as my running back sleeper this year. He had a really good year that got overshadowed by the breakout of Jalen Hurts. Not too many running backs can run for over 1,200 yards and 10-plus touchdowns and it really kind of go under the radar. But he did it. So he ended up, like I said, with 259 carries, 1,200 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He had 26 targets, 20 catches for 78 yards and no touchdowns. He could have had a lot more touchdowns, but Jalen Hurts had 10? It was 12 rushing touchdowns maybe, something like that. Yeah, and those were all with inside the 5. Jalen Hurts led the team on carries inside the 5, not the running back, the quarterback. Miles Sanders goes to a new offense in Carolina, who for the last 4 or 5 weeks, Donta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard were very good fantasy options for the week. They ran the ball and ran the ball and ran the ball and then ran it again. They ran it all 4 downs if they had to. Miles Sanders is my dark horse for rushing title leader this year. I think this year he could run for 1,500. End zone's going to vary, but I think he could get 1,500. Whenever he ran for the Eagles this past year, when he got 15-plus carries, he scored under 10 fantasy points twice. He got 15 carries in 8 games and was under 10 fantasy points twice. He split time. He was never more than I think it was a 60% share was what he got. Still the majority, but not all. And if he goes into this season healthy with a rookie quarterback for the Panthers, I could see him blow up this year and kind of go from a mid-tier running back 2 to a low-end RB1. The other thing I like to see about this is he's in a very weak division, and you want running backs that are going to be on winning teams. And if the Panthers, I'm assuming they're going to draft a quarterback at the 101 since they spent everything to get there. Running backs are quarterbacks' best friends, especially rookie quarterbacks. So I'd like to see the Panthers establish the run game early with Miles Sanders and just let him eat. He was a monster in Philly. Again, hate to see him go, but Miles Sanders should have an amazing year behind that offensive line and that offensive scheme that just wants to run, run, run.
Yeah, and also he will be reuniting with old Eagles offensive coordinator Frank Reich.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah,
So
so there's a fun
I
fact
like
for
this
you.
pick at running back for Miles Sanders.
Yep. Hate to see him go. Hate to see him go.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also an Eagles fan, so every person that leaves is just stings you just a little bit.
Yep. Yep.
All right, so moving right along, Lucas, you're up. Who do you
All
have
right.
for your running back?
So I have Rashad White. My thing about Rashad White is last year he only had 4 games where he had over 50% of the snap share, and one of those games he was directly at 50%. He did not finish as a high running back overall, but with them getting rid of Fournette, in those games he had over 50%. He averaged over 4.5 yards per carry, anywhere from 5 to 9 targets. The only difference is different QB, which could help him. You don't know if it's going to be Kyle Trask or Baker at this point. If it is Baker, it does scare you a little bit because he does like to sling it. He's not really a check down quarterback. But I believe that Rashad White has fantasy RB1 all over him. I think that he can be a top 12 running back easily with his receiving. He's proven that he can run for 4.5 yards per carry. He can take workloads of 20 to 25 carries a game, rush for over 100 yards. And he only had 3 touchdowns last year. So if you're looking at him in the red zone as the RB1 without Fournette, he's going to pick up more touchdowns this year. So I like him a lot. I think Tampa might draft a running back, but I don't think it's going to be in the first 2 or 3 rounds. I think it's going to be more so just somebody to come in to take 20% of the snaps from him to give him a break. So I like him a lot this year.
Yeah, he's a great volume play this year. I mean, look how the Bucks have used Fournette the past couple. He's
The other
just going to
thing,
get
his
opportunities
ADP
and
is
opportunities.
RB 26, 27 right now. You can get him in the 8th, 9th round probably. Like
And yeah,
he's gonna
he's
be a
outside
great
that dead zone too. Yep.
Yeah, definitely a late round pickup. That is potentially going to be the RB1 in Tampa
Yep.
Bay. We're assuming. All right, so to finish off the running backs, Tyler, you are up.
All right, so my running back is in a similar situation as Lucas's running back. I have Khalil Herbert with David Montgomery gone. I can see his carries going up a little bit. He's only sharing snaps with Donta Foreman, and anytime he had carries anywhere from like 7 to 12 carries, he was averaging 5.9 yards per carry, which is fairly good for a running back. He did miss 4 games with an injury late in the season, but again, David Montgomery was the starter, so they didn't really miss him. But what I like about Khalil Herbert is the situation that he's in. Going back to, like I said, about how I pick sleepers, is going back to the situation. The Bears were number 1 in rush offense, with, again, Fields being a big part of that. But I think that they could rely a little more on Khalil Herbert, as I think he's the clear-cut number 1 guy right now. They were 2nd in rushing attempts and 9th in rushing touchdowns. So he's going to get his carries. He's going to get attempts in the red zone. I think Khalil Herbert could be a great late round pickup. Maybe a flex guy that comes in and out of your lineup from bench to flex. Maybe even a trade piece later on in the season where you can get some picks for him. But I would highly recommend putting Khalil Herbert on your list.
Yeah. I view Khalil Herbert the same as I do Kenneth Gainwell for the Eagles if something were to happen to Rashad Penny. I feel like those two are very similar in their skill sets. So I believe that I 100% agree with Khalil Herbert, not because I have him in my dynasty lineup, but because he's a great player.
All right, so moving right along, we're going to be talking about the guys out wide, the wide receivers. For my wide receiver, I have Terrace Marshall Jr. from the Carolina Panthers.
Ooh.
That's
Yeah,
deep. That's
this
deep.
is a very deep sleeper. But, I mean, finished standard wide receiver 82, PPR wide receiver 88. Another one of a taller individual. He is 6'3", 201 pounds, so fits my checklist. A fun fact I have about him is in an interview with the Taunton Gazette, said if he could have dinner with 3 people, living or dead, in order, he said Jesus Christ, Tupac, and then his uncle Joe Delaney, which I thought was pretty funny. So if you ever get a chance, check out the interview because he hits you with the normal athlete. Through Jesus, all things was possible and stuff like that. And then he goes straight to, this second would definitely be Tupac because he's so wise. I could definitely learn a thing or two. And he's like,
He's so
and my
wise.
uncle. It was an interview of him in high school. Definitely check it out if you can. It's pretty funny. Going into his 3rd season, even though he's going into his 3rd season, he's only 22 years old. So not only does he have the experience, but he also has the youth on his side. Played 14 games last season, and his stats were 47 targets for 28 catches, 490 yards, and 1 touchdown. If you're an advanced stat guy, 17.5 yards per catch. That is almost 20 yards per catch, which is an absurd yard per catch rating. I think it was like top 5 for people who caught over like 20 passes or something. Just to put that in a PPR perspective, 17.5 yards per catch plus an extra point for a catch would be 2.75 fantasy points per catch, which would be absurd. That's not even including touchdowns or anything. And not a lot of people know this, but he was actually an insane receiver at LSU. He was actually tied 4th all-time in career touchdowns with 23, only behind Dwayne Bowie, Brandon LaFell, and Justin Jefferson by 1 touchdown. And he's tied 4th with Jamar Chase. So those are some notable names that I'm sure everyone knows if you have any any football intellect. One thing that I'm thinking, this is more of just like a 24-year-old dumb point of view, but he's 22. Carolina's going to get a quarterback in the draft, most likely. Everyone's assuming. If I'm 22, 21 years old, I'm not going to want to, hang out with the 30-year-old Adam Thielens or the 27, 26-year-old DJ Chark. I'm going to hang out with kids my age. So I definitely could see Terrace Marshall sneaking in an early season connection with one of the rookies because I don't want to hang out with no geezer when I'm playing. I want to hang out with people my age, and I want to hang out with people that I can get along with. So just as a dumb outsider thought, that's one of the things I could see is a super early offseason connection between a receiver and quarterback. What else do I have? And he's playing alongside, to add on to the Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, he's playing alongside them. 2 very good receivers when they were in their primes. So he could definitely learn a lot from them because he only had DJ Moore to really look behind, and he's now gone. So bringing in more of a vet offensive receiver core, he could definitely learn a thing or two. Don't be surprised back half. I don't know the early half, but back half, don't be surprised if he moves up the depth chart, possibly to wide receiver 1. So that's my very outreached wide receiver sleeper. So, Nick, you're up. Who do you have for your wide receiver sleeper?
My wide receiver sleeper is Jacoby Myers, the new Las Vegas Raider wide receiver. His change is a massive upgrade from the Patriots. Even though he was the wide receiver 1, he was catching passes from Mac Jones and that defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator offense. He didn't really have an offensive mind there in New England to kind of help him really get to where he should be. He didn't even have 100 targets. He had 67 catches for 804 yards and 6 touchdowns. Whenever he received 8 targets in a game, which he received 8 targets in 5 games, I believe it was last year, he scored under 16 fantasy points once. The Raiders, at least with Derek Carr, they like to throw the ball. Even though Josh Jacobs was the rushing champ last year, they still let it eat in the air. I'm not expecting too much of that to change. He does have a new quarterback, obviously changing teams, but the Raiders have a brand new quarterback in Jimmy G, who we've seen who could support 2 very fantasy relevant wide receivers in Debo and Brandon Ayuk, as well as a tight end in George Kittle, and as well as in a running back as Christian McCaffrey. So he still has really good weapons around him. Jimmy Garoppolo does, and I think Jacoby Myers will get lost in the offseason Raiders hype with Devontae Adams coming back, who's obviously going to be the wide receiver one. Josh Jacobs, who is coming off of a career year, and then of course Jimmy G coming in. I think he's going to fly under the radar, and I feel like he could really, really, really be boosted by the offense around him. Now, I do want to say he's not a very good runner, as he has 2 rushes for negative 11 yards, and he kind of threw the game away against the Cardinals. Or no, not who does Chandler Jones play for? The Raiders. Oh, he threw it. He was just giving the team a little bit of a boost from last year.
He was trying to get that bag early. He knew where he was headed. He knew where he was
Inside
headed.
connections.
He wanted to let them know that he could throw the football just in case they needed it. To the Raiders, that is, not to his own team. Jacoby Myers should be. I feel like he should really step up from his wide receiver 33 finish last year, in standard scoring and in wide receiver 28 in PPR scoring. He's going to be a value pick. I see him somewhere in the mid to late rounds, maybe, unless the only thing that could hurt him is the resurgence of Hunter Renfrow, who vanished, I think. And if he shows up, that could hurt us a little bit. But Jacoby Myers, I see, is taking that slot, that wide receiver 2 role in a pass-heavy offense with a quarterback that can support 2 fantasy-relevant wide receivers.
I think the only notable thing that Hunter Renfrow did last year was run into Devontae Adams in a game-winning drive.
So that is a pretty important play. You know, you never have enough trick
against
plays.
a division rival in the Chiefs. So
yeah, he made a game-changing play. Let's just leave it there.
Oh, easily. All right, so moving on to Lucas. If you're one of the few people who follow us on social media, we have a little bit of a switch up. Just to plug in our socials real quick, if you're listening on the audio, you can follow us at Instagram at fantasy.bums. We have a TikTok, fantasy_bums_. Our Twitter is bums_ff, and our YouTube is fantasy_bums. So, Lucas, we know you switched it up, but let us know, who is your new wide receiver?
So my new sleeper is Rondale Moore. To be honest, I first wanted to switch because I saw a video of Gannon hugging him, making rocket noises, and saying, shots, gonna take a lot of shots, after making rocket noises at him. So
that would switch me as well. I didn't see the video, but if I did, I definitely would.
That cut me deep. But the more I've looked into it, the more I love it. He's going to be a wide receiver 2, because assuming DeAndre Hopkins is going to be traded, Marquise Brown's going to be wide receiver 1. He's going to be wide receiver 2. He played in 7 games last year. 5 of those games, he had at least 8 targets. He only scored 1 touchdown and still managed in those games to score 13, 11, 4, 24, 15, and 18 with only scoring 1 touchdown. Kyler Murray probably not going to start the season, but I think that benefits him, especially with screen passes in PPR leagues and slant routes in PPR leagues. And as Coach Gannon mentioned, when he said going to take shots, he is a burner. He is very, very fast. So I think that he's going to be a very good option to pick up in. I don't know how late that he's going to be. I would say probably around 11 to 12 rounds this year, maybe a little earlier once D-Hop gets traded. I think he's going to be a really good option, though, for like a flex to start the season, possibly a wide receiver 2 towards the end of the season.
All righty. And then, Tyler, do you want to finish this off for your wide receiver sleeper?
Of course I do. I have a man who was mentioned before, Jameson Williams from the Detroit Lions. Again, the situation he is in, I really like. He'd be coming up as wide receiver 2 now that DJ Chark's gone. And this man can run. He's fast. He's a burner. His only catch is a 41-yard touchdown. And unlike Nick's sleeper, he can run the ball. He also had a 40-yard carry the next week. Yes, he's coming off an ACL injury, but so did Cooper Kupp, and he won Triple Crown the next year. So It's
So
really depending on how
you're
you
saying
feel about the
Jamison
age.
Williams is going to win the triple crown
That's
this year?
not what I'm saying.
You should have
If you're
just said
afraid
it.
of the injury, I would look away. But if you're willing to take a chance, I would go on Jamison Williams late. He's speedy, very fast, a good complement to Amon-Ra. I think teams are going to kind of forget about him in the first half of the season and focus more on Amon-Ra. But that Lions offense that they've created a very pass-heavy offense where the Lions are third in total offense, seventh in passing offense, 10th in passing attempts, eighth in passing touchdowns, fourth in total touchdowns, second in red zone offense, and second in red zone percentage. And if he can stay healthy and stay a part of this team, he will get a part of that share. And I think that he could move up in many people's lists as a very solid wide receiver to take. He could even be, again, a trade piece. If your team's not doing so well, but you have Jameis, you can maybe trade him for some picks to help your team the next year. Again, I like the situation Jamison Williams is in. Even though with the ACL injury, I feel like he could bounce back and have a very good season.
He's young. He'll recover quicker from that ACL injury too. He's not going to be hindered by it as much as somebody as let's just say like an Adam Thielen would be if he were to tear his ACL.
Exactly.
And if you play PPR like our league, he's averaging 11.1 fantasy points per catch. So if he keeps that volume
Yeah,
up,
I mean
that's going to be wide receiver one numbers. That's all I'm saying.
he would shatter records.
All right, moving on to the tight end positions. So for mine, it's kind of a reach depending on how the draft goes. But for my tight end, I have Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. Everyone knows the departure of Dalton Schultz happened this offseason. So for him, he was standard and PPR tight end 48. He is a much bigger tight end as a 6'5", 245-pound tight end. And his little fun fact that I have is in an interview for the Dallas News, he reported saying, "I got kicked out of my youth soccer league for tackling people." Apparently, he played defense in soccer, and when he was young, he would just follow the people and literally like suplex them. And he got kicked out of his youth league. So he has that dog in him. He's a very gritty player. Played 16 games last year, so Dallas did put him in on the field. He played almost every single game last year. He's also going into his sophomore season, which seems to be a pattern with my sleepers. He went 22 targets for 19 catches. That is an 86% catch rate, which is very good for the tight end position. 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. His yards come out to be 9.16 yards per catch. So almost a first down per catch for a tight end. I would sign up for that any day of the week. I have played behind Dalton Schultz, which demanded a bunch of targets, which I just talked about, and he's now gone. So that moves Jake Ferguson into the standalone tight end one. I think Hendershot, whatever that other dude is going to be a backup tight end. I don't think he's going to do much damage to Ferguson in tight end one. And I know a lot of mocks have a Dallas drafting a tight end. I think they could use that pick more for like an offensive or defensive lineman, or maybe some safety play, or even something on the defense just to help them out, because he's 24 years old. He's going into his sophomore season. They used a fourth on him last year, so I don't know why even if they do draft a tight end early, I believe that they're going to start Ferguson first just to work in the new tight end into the offense. So he's going to have a couple games to at least showcase what he has to offer. And he also fits the mold of a prototypical Dallas tight end. They like him big, they like him possession catchers, and they like him deep in the end zone. Just to give you the last 3 tight ends, it was Dalton Schultz, not as big, but a more bigger set possession tight end. None of these guys are going to kill you with their speed or nothing. And then there's a tight end, Jason Witten, who is very well known, future Hall of Fame tight end. And then Dan Campbell in 2003, which is the Lions head coach. Which if you take a look at him, he's not a small dude. He is a pretty big fellow. So they like their tight ends bigger. They like him more of a possession route runner instead of a vertical threat. And they like him to be able to catch in the red zone. So Jake Ferguson checks all those boxes for me, and I think he'll be a very good late round to a free agent pickup for your fantasy league. Alrighty. So now Nick also had to switch up. If you follow us on our socials, he kind of already had a bad take. First episode, we're already hitting strong. He had Foster Monroe, and we had our sleepers submitted before we found out about his cancer and everything. So hopefully he
Yeah.
recovers good and everything. But he kind of ruined our tight end take. So. So,
Yeah.
Nick, who is your new tight end that you have?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that Foster Moreau is my lock for my 2024 tight end sleeper. So if you guys stick around for a year when we do this episode again, he will be on my list.
If you're in a
But
keeper league, I mean,
pick him
potential
up.
keeper.
Pick him up. Dynasty, never know. I'm gonna go with somebody who is gonna go into the season as the tight end too. His name's Trey McBride. Again, another sophomore season guy. He, unlike Ferguson, he can run. He has pretty good yak. He can run after he catches the ball. The elephant in the room is Zach Ertz. Will Zach Ertz stay healthy? Will Zach Ertz be back? All this kind of stuff. I think that Zach Ertz is not going to be ready for week 1. He could be, but he's a little bit older. I believe he's in his early to mid 30s, so his recovery time is lengthened because of his age. And whenever he was gone, and mind you, if you look at his fantasy numbers, Trey McBride was catching passes from Trace McSorley, Colt McCoy, and David Blau. So that's not a very good. It's not a very good quarterback room. So, but he unfortunately would probably start the year off with one of those guys at quarterback. But whenever he did get, 10 targets, I know that's a lot for a tight end, but he's gonna go in. He could be the number 2 option on the team. When he had 10 targets, he scored over 20 points. He runs with the ball. He runs hard. He catches. He blocks. He's an all-around good tight end, and he's going to see more of the field this year. And I think this could be a good start and a really good career for Trey McBride.
All right. So again, Foster Moreau was the original pick,
Yes,
but unforeseen circumstances had to switch.
Yep.
Moving on to Lucas, you have Irv Smith Jr. as your tight end. You want to talk a little bit about him?
Yeah, so I feel like I do this every year with the same exact player.
It's a trap.
Can confirm.
I am a huge Irv Smith Jr. fan, and I am waiting for it to pay off. And I think this is the best chance that he has. He's in new scenery in Cincinnati. He's tight end 1, no competition at all. And he is, I like to consider him the Kyle Pitts before Kyle Pitts. He is a very fast tight end. He could be a slot receiver if he really wanted to be. He has all of the potential in the world if he can stay healthy. And I think going to Cincinnati is going to help him a lot. He's going to be in a great offense already. Running back's unsure right now. They might cut Mixon. But the pass game is just insane. I am also a huge Joe Burrow fan, huge Joe Burrow believer. And if you see what he's done with like Hayden Hurst in the past few years, he's not going to be a top 5 tight end, but he can give you around like a top 10 tight end, like bye week filler, whatever you need. He's just going to be a lot more fantasy relevant than he has the past few years if he can stay healthy. And if he can really get into this offense, I think that he can jump up to like a tight end 8, tight end 7. He's still really young too. So I think he has all the potential in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you could see what the Bengals did, like you said, with Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst was fantasy relevant for at least half the year last year, and Irv Smith is way more athletic than Hayden Hurst is, so it should be a great situation. I really like that sleeper, even though it's probably a trap, but that's what sleepers are for, right? Can't stay healthy.
Yeah, and the way Lucas is with Irv Smith, I'm the same way with Kyle Pitts. I always get Kyle Pitts.
I draft him every year in the later rounds.
I drafted him early 3rd last year.
He's going to explode one of these times. He's going to do it.
Yep.
He's going to have an amazing season.
He'll have his breakout.
Your move, Atlanta. Your move. All right, so ending our tight end segment is Tyler, and good luck pronouncing this guy.
I think I have it right. I'm not going to try the first name. I'm just going to call him by his nickname, Chigakonkwo, for the Tennessee Titans.
Perfect. There you go.
He played all 17 games Oh, he went to Maryland? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did go to Maryland.
Oh, okay. But he played all 17 games. He was ranked 25 in PPR leagues. His standard tight end was 21. He had 7 top 20 appearances, 5 top 15 appearances, and 4 top 10 appearances. And he is the starter as of now. I could see the Titans taking a tight end, maybe in the draft, but we got to see if they move up to that 3 spot, maybe make a trade with the Cardinals and take a quarterback like some mocks are taking. Again, this is before the draft, so we're going as of now. And the Titans are a very run-heavy offense, I will say, but I don't really see much of a receiver threat outside of Traylon Burks. Outside of Traylon Burks, there's Nick Westbrook-Akine and Kyle Phillips. And if they do draft a younger tight end, the younger guys, they love to look to their tight ends. They love to look to the big guys, and I could see Chigakonkwo making a big leap. I also want to throw in an honorable mention for Jelani Woods of the Indianapolis Colts. I'm a Colts fan, and every time Jelani Woods touched the ball, we got 15 to 20 yards. He had 2 touchdowns against the Chiefs. And I would put either one of those guys kind of in the same position. The only reason I don't have Jelani Woods in as my sleeper is because as of now, he is the tight end 2 behind Mo Alley Cox. But I could see that maybe making a change in the season. So I would look out for both of the guys in Chigakonkwo and Jelani Woods.
Adding on to Chigakonkwo, if you are an athletic tight end slut like I am, Chigakonkwo is fast. Yep. He ran the fastest 40 in the combine for a tight end the year that he came in. I think he ran like a 4.45 or something like that. He is very, very athletic.
Yes. Mm-hmm. He has potential to be the number 1 target in that offense. Now, that's not saying a lot because you could be catching passes from Malik Willis or Ryan Tannehill or unknown in the draft. But, I mean, to be a number 1 target on an offense, that has to have some upside in itself.
Yeah, and it really, the Titans and honestly the Colts both really depend on how they draft.
Mm-hmm.
I think that both guys could go for younger quarterbacks because I mean this draft is loaded with young quarterbacks.
Yep.
So I would be comfortable with taking Chigakonkwo or Jelani Woods if I already have a set tight end 1 like I did last year with Travis Kelce or George Kittle or like a Dallas Goedert or somebody. If I already have a set tight end 1, I'd be fine with taking one of those guys as maybe a trade piece, or maybe a potential starter if one of them gets hurt, or if one of the starters gets hurt.
Speaking of trading, he's a really good. If you could try to target him in a dynasty trade, that's huge. He's an elite company. He's an elite company with his combine results, with his production on the field in college, his production on the field in the NFL. He has the makings to be the next Travis Kelce or the next Tony G or somebody like that.
The other thing about Chig is if Ryan Tannehill is the starter, you're looking at a lot less fantasy value. He's not really a tight end thrower.
Yeah.
But if Malik Willis is in or they draft somebody to start, rookie QBs, first-year QBs love their tight ends.
They do. Big safe target, and he's athletic to catch and run.
Especially with Malik Willis, who can't throw farther than 5 yards down the field.
That's true. Yep. So speedy players definitely gets the pants tighter if you know what we're talking about. All right. So earlier in the beginning of the show, I said our fantasy league does not discriminate towards kickers and defense. We play them every week, and they are an integral part of our league. So we wanted to include kicker and defense sleepers for you as well. So you get the whole 9 yards with us. So for my kicker, I have Cade York of the Cleveland Browns. Now, this dude is a phonetic anomaly. Let me give you some stats about his name. He's tied for kicker 1 for the least amount of syllables in his name with 2. Other notable kickers with 2 syllables is Matt Gay, Nick Folk, and Will Lutz.
That's elite company. That's elite company.
It is. If you look at that, I mean, those are
really good kickers.
So if you like to compare players with players like earlier, be on the lookout. including Y in your vowels, so A, E, I, O, U, and Y, 50% of his name consists of vowels. So if you like your letters as much as I do, Cade York is the kicker for you. He finished kicker 24 last year. Fits my big boy mold of 6'1", 205 pounds. A fun fact about Cade York: he is a 4th-round draft pick, which is the highest kicker taken since 2016, when a kicker went in the 2nd round. Like we said, we're huge West Virginia University fans, and Pat McAfee was huge on this guy coming out of college. So if Pat McAfee gives him the green light, I have to give him the green light. So he played all 17 games last year, so no fluke injuries or illnesses or anything. He plays the whole season. He's going into his sophomore season, so he just had his rookie season last year. He went 35 for 37 on extra points, which in a league where extra points were harder than usual, that was pretty good. His field goals could increase. He was 24 for 32, which is 75%. Not the best, but it's also not the bottom barrel of the league. One of the stats that I think is going to increase next year is 4 of his 17 games, he only had 3 or more. He had 3 or more attempts, so he only had volume in 4 games. So the other 13 games, he had 2 or less attempts. So the more field goal attempts you get, obviously, the more you're going to make, and that results into your fantasy points. So I definitely see the Cleveland offense adding the pieces they did will be better. We'll have more red zone opportunities. They'll be on the opponent's side of the 50. So I definitely see Cade York being a more field goal attempt opportunities. Now, if he converts them into makes, that'd be pretty cool. But he's definitely going to have the attempts. So that's pretty much my spiel for the kicker. Nick, would you like to go with yours?
So my kicker, again, I'm a disgusting homer. So it was only fair for me to go with Jake Elliott. Eagles, I still project them to score a lot of points. I don't see their offense really slowing down. And at the end of the day, you want a kicker who's going to A, be in field goal position, or B, kicking extra points. Both of those are great. And the Eagles had one of the best offenses last year as they finished in opponent territory. A lot of their drives, not necessarily touchdowns, but field goals too. And if I remember correctly, you want somebody, if we're playing scoring like our league, we have it as it's per yard, right? So a 35-yard field goal is 3.5. Okay.
Which is a very good change if you have normal kicker settings.
Shout out to
change. I would recommend.
Shout out to the co-commish and the commish for that one. But every yard counts if you're playing that way. So you need a kicker who has a leg. Jake Elliott's career long, I think, is 63. Could be wrong, could be 62, but still, that's 1 yard. Anyway, he has the potential to make a 60-yard field goal any drive, any given day. And, I mean, he was 51 and for 53 on extra points. That is an absurd amount of extra points. And he only kicked 23 field goals. So I kind of see those numbers flipping a little bit this next year. And field goals lead to more points for kickers. Less points for the offense, which sad to say, being an Eagles fan. But, hey, if Jake Elliott becomes kicker 1, then I hit on one of my sleepers. So, there you go. Jake Elliott, draft him.
Yep, sounds good to me. Also as an Eagles fan. All right, moving on. We have Lucas next with his kicker.
All right, so I have Jason Sanders of the Miami Dolphins. 3 years ago, this guy was kicker 1. If you look at his stats,
so draft him 3 years ago.
If you got a time machine, go back and get Jake. Go back.
If you look at his stats, they scored more touchdowns than they've ever scored while he's been a part of the Miami Dolphins. Which obviously, when you add Tyreek Hill to your offense, that happens. He also kicked the second least amount of field goals that he has ever kicked. I see the Dolphins as a team; they are good, but I see them as probably having some QB.
Your mic, Luke. There you go.
All right. I see the Dolphins as probably having some QB issues this year. Tua doesn't have the dog in him. Talked about retiring. So he doesn't know ball.
Does not.
So I see them still getting scoring opportunities just because when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you're going to get across the 50. And I see that as not as many touchdowns, a lot more field goals. And Jason Sanders is a really good kicker. He missed, in the past 3 years, he's missed 11 field goals, 15, somewhere around there. And a lot have been over 45 yards. So I think he's going to be a really good option for kicker this year.
All right, moving on to Tyler to finish off our kicker segment.
So for my kicker, I have Chase McLaughlin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was on the Colts last year, and he played in 16 games, but only kicked in 15 of those games because the Colts could not score a point against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 2. So he did play a majority of the season, but only kicked in one less game because, again, the Colts offense couldn't do anything. He finished kicker 12 in 2022 and was perfect on extra points, going 21 for 21. And he's also perfect within 30 yards, going 7 for 7 for 100%. Within 40 yards, he is 5 for 6, which is 83%. Within 50 yards, he is 9 for 11, which is 81%. And within 60 yards, or 59, I should say, he is 9 for 12, which is 75. Now, going back to the Tampa offense, where Lucas said that Baker's a slinger, the field gets short on the opposite side of the 50. So I can see drives not ending in touchdowns, but ending in kicks. Because, again, Baker's not a check down quarterback. So I could see McLaughlin having more attempts on field goals. He was 30 for 36 with the Colts. I could see, again, that going up a little bit more now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like Chase McLaughlin. I liked him on the Colts. He was a pretty good kicker, and I think that he could move up a little bit, maybe be in the top 10 next year for kickers in the NFL and for fantasy.
Alrighty, so there's 4 kickers for you to choose from. We have kicker 24 last year all the way up to kicker 12. So we kind of have a nice little spread for you there. To finish off our very first episode, we are going to finish on the other side of the ball with our defensive sleepers. So for me to start off, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, which stat-wise is not really that big of a sleeper. I did not realize they finished 6th when I was making my list. However, I hope you spare me the embarrassment because the last 4 years I had their defensive position. So let me show you why I thought they weren't that good. In 2021, they finished 31 out of 32. In 2020, they finished 28th. And in 2019 and 2018, they finished 18th. So the last 4 years, they were in the bottom half of the league in defense. So when you think of Jacksonville, besides the early 2010s when they were Saxonville, you don't really think of them much of it as a defensive team. They're also home to some cool cats. So they're home of former WWE diva Kelly Kelly. If you don't know who that is, I suggest you look her up and thank me later because she is anti-ugly. She is attractive.
She's against the whole ugly thing.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, she is very attractive. They're also the home of Leonard Skinner's lead vocalist, Johnny Van Zant, which, as you guys know, I am a Leonard Skinner fan. Wouldn't be mad to have that as part of my defensive stats. And they're also home of Limp Bizkit, the rock band, the early 90s rock band. So they have some honorable names there in Jacksonville. And a little fun fact about Limp Bizkit, I kind of went down the Limp Bizkit wormhole in the internet. The reason they named themselves that is to repel listeners. They are quoted with saying, the name is there to turn people's heads away. A lot of people pick up the disc and go, Limp Bizkit, oh, they must suck. So they literally named themselves so people can listen to them, which I thought was pretty funny.
It's kind of like what we're doing with our title, the Bums. You know?
Oh, yeah. You don't
Took a
come
little
for
page out
the
of their book.
good content. You come for the laughs and everything. So for 2022, they had 35 sacks, 16 forced fumbles, 12 fumble recoveries, 14 interceptions, and 4 touchdowns. This will be their second year under Doug Peterson, who obviously made the team better, jumping them up from the 31st defense to the 6th. I don't see Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson's going to be keeping the same energy there. So I picture them within the top 10 defense again next year. And they have young players. They had the number 1 pick for the last 2 years, I believe, Trevor Lawrence and Trayvon Walker. So they have young players in their team. I know Trevor is an offensive player, but their defense has some young players as well. So they get another year of molding, another off season. So I feel like the defense is going to gel as well. And then to flip it to Trevor Lawrence, good offenses put the defense in better positions. If your offense is running up the score, the other offense is going to have to keep up. So there's obviously going to be more opportunities for mistakes. And if Jacksonville can capitalize on that, they're going to have a lot more sacks, a lot more fumbles, a lot more picks, and hopefully a couple more touchdowns via fumble recovery to the crib or a pick 6 or Jamal Agnew returning. I mean, that's a potential punt return or kick return to the crib.
Yep.
So I mean, that adds on because it also does special teams. So just thinking in that way as well. So my defense to round out my sleepers is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And to move on to Nick, he has the New York Giants as his defensive sleeper. So let's talk a little bit about the Giants.
So the Giants are an interesting team. The NFC East is going to be interesting this year because they play the division twice, but they play the AFC East, which will be probably the toughest division in football. So this is more or less of a great streamer option defense, but they still ended up with 41 sacks, 18 forced fumbles, 10 fumble recoveries, 6 picks, and 2 touchdowns. And they have one of the best young players in Kayvon Thibodeau, who's just going to add so much pressure, and he's just going to boost the whole defense up, the whole morale. Brian Dable's in there doing great things. He took the Giants from a pretty bottom-tier divisional team to a wild card contending team, surprisingly. But the Giants' defense is going to need to step up this year if they want to win, if they want to be competitive, especially with this tough schedule they're going to have to play against this year. So I do see them taking a step up. I would like to see the interceptions come up a little bit. They need to win the turnover battle a lot this year to really stay in and win games against these better teams. So I see them stepping up and making the plays they need to make. That's why the Giants are my defensive sleeper this year.
All right, and moving on to Lucas. We are jumping within the division. Lucas, if you want to talk about your defensive sleeper.
I have the Washington Commanders. The curse is over. Dan Snyder gone.
Praise
He's
be.
He's going to go to Europe or something, as PFT always says, and he's going to go to Europe and die probably, maybe go to prison.
Preach.
And Chase Young
Yep.
is going to be an X factor this year, and Chase Young is terrifying. I think that is going to really boost their sacks this year. They've underperformed a lot the past 2 seasons. Defense 13, defense I believe 22 the year before, 24 the year before. Season before that they were defense 6. So I think their sacks go up. I think forced fumbles go up. And honestly, with the Dan Snyder curse lifted, this defense could carry a team to a Super Bowl without him there. The Washington defense is intact all the way to the Super Bowl.
All right, so Super Bowl contenders. You heard it here first, Fantasy Bums. The Washington Commanders. Go ahead and throw that future on them. All right, do you have anything else for that defense, Lucas?
No, that's all.
All righty.
Curse is lifted.
Yep, curse is lifted. Shout out Dan Snyder. To finish off our sleeper picks in general, we have Tyler's defense. Tyler, go ahead.
So I'm choosing the Carolina Panthers defense. Now I'm going to rattle off some stats, and they may not sound very impressive, but I'll wrap it all up here at the end. So they finished 18th in total defense. Their total points was 87. Points per game, this is fantasy-wise, is 5.1. They had 35 sacks. They had 3 defensive touchdowns, which is third overall. They're tied for third with a couple other teams. They had On the year, they had 374 points allowed. Their passing yards per game was 239, and their rushing yards was 121. Now, that may not sound very good. And while doing research on this, I kind of thought about changing my defense. But there's one main factor that made me stick with it. Is the signing of Ejiro Evero from the Denver Broncos. And I think that he could make players like Brian Burns, J.C. Horn, Derek Brown, Shaq Thompson. I think that he could put them in the position to be really good players. And plus the signings with Von Bell from the Bengals and Xavier Woods, they have some solid pieces on their defense. Plus being paired with a weak division in the NFC South with a Tom Brady-less Bucs and the Falcons. The only team that really kind of shifts me a little bit in this division is the Saints with the signing of Derek Carr.
Yep.
But without Michael Thomas, without Michael Thomas, and possibly losing Kamara, I could see the Panthers playing really well against their division. The Panthers defense playing really well against their division rivals, which is about 6 games of the year.
The other good thing that the Panthers have with them, too, is the fact that they're going to run the ball a lot. Well, they should, at least going off of what they did last year. So they're going to do the old Ron Rivera strategy against the Eagles last year. Let's just run the ball for 35 minutes so the best offense only has the ball for 12 or whatever the math adds up to be.
Yeah.
15.
And much like Shanholtz's sleeper defense, they're in a very weak division. Shanholtz with the Jags being in the AFC South with the Colts, Texans, and Titans, who have very weak offenses now. I think that the Carolina Panthers could have a really good defense against this weak NFC South, again being the Bucs, Saints, and Falcons.
Yep.
Yeah, all great points.
I want to add in on the Panthers real quick. I did see a report. I know we've had a lot of Panthers sleepers throughout this. We've had a receiver, we've had a running back, we've had a defense. And I know a lot of the offense was based on if they take a quarterback or not. And I know we basically said they're going to take a quarterback. I did see a report that Bryce Young has canceled all of his pre-draft interviews, which has been a historic sign that he's going to be drafted number 1 overall because the Panthers don't want him meeting with anybody else. So most likely Bryce Young to the Panthers. Really thought it was going to be Stroud.
Yeah, but I was hoping for Stroud too, but because Bryce Young's going to take away a little bit from the rushing aspect of Miles Sanders. But
yeah, so we're already making calls. Bryce Young, our first overall pick in the 2023 draft. Go ahead and place your future and your Washington Commanders Super Bowl future. So
Yes.
That's 2 bets for you.
You want to win some money? Stay here.
Yes, we'll let you know the good picks. So that wraps up our sleepers for the very first episode. We even threw in some extra honorable mentions because that's who we are. We're just a giving podcast. We like to give to the listeners. So we even gave you some extras in there. So hopefully one of the 4 from one of us sticks with you or, jumps out of the page to you. So it could help you in your fantasy leagues, in your dynasty leagues, redraft, whatever you guys are doing. Hopefully one of our sleepers, helps you out in the future. All right, so that wraps it up for the first ever episode of the Fantasy Bums podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed what we presented to you. Like I said, hopefully one of the picks we have for our sleepers shouts out to you, jumps off the page, helps you win a fantasy championship. I won a championship in my league, and then Nick won this year in our league. So we have some championship caliber, sleeper picks for you.
Let's also add in. I won 3. I won 3 of 3 leagues this year. So
yeah, so we have
I'll
3
take all
leagues
the praise.
set up. We have a super flex league, a dynasty league, and our redraft keeper league. Nick, unfortunately for us, not for him, but for us, won all 3 of them.
Yep.
So he was given the triple crown.
Oh yeah.
So hopefully, I'm definitely not because I went all in with our picks. You can trade picks in our league, and I am not setting pretty for next year. So, but last year I was in the chip again. So 1 of 1 in the chip in our league, can't argue with that. So again, one more plug for us for our socials. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. as well as whatever audio podcast you're listening to right now. If you're listening on audio, our Instagram is fantasy.bums. Our TikTok is fantasy_bums_. Our Twitter is bums_ff. And our YouTube is Fantasy Bums. If you enjoy what we had for you today for episode 1, we will be making an episode 2 where we take each of the NFC divisions and we make an all fantasy team. We each get a division, and we're going to let you know who we think is the best of the best in that division as far as fantasy. And we'll even give you a spoiler for the third one. It is the AFC side. So the next 2 episodes will be an NFC and AFC all fantasy recap. So check back in for that and see who we have for that. My name is Shan Holtz, and alongside me is Nick, Tyler, and Lucas. And from the Fantasy Bums, goodbye, and hopefully see you again.